Okay, so this call is being recorded and we place our recording on your YouTube channel. If you don't want to be recorded, you may want to drop off now. Um, Kumar, floor is yours, man.
Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today, we are going to spend some time talking about some of the VDI offering, especially the latest updates that we rolled out the last month or so. So let me make it a full screen. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep, man, we can hear you fine.
Okay, so as always, what I'll do is I'll just take a few minutes to talk about our VDI offerings. But today's session will be focusing on Azure Virtual Desktop. And in the future, if there's Naveen, then I will talk about Windows 365. So these are the desktop as a service offerings from Microsoft today. What you see on the right-hand side is Azure Virtual Desktop, which is a combination of platform as a service and infra as a service. It has been in the market close to 3.5, 4 years. It's a cloud-native solution. Whether you use Azure Virtual Desktop or Windows 365, which is a SaaS offering that runs in Microsoft managed tenant. Both of these offerings allows you to stream Windows 10/11 desktop securely from the cloud to your device, right? So the PCs runs in the cloud, but you'll be able to securely stream them with highly secure communication channel. So one solution, which is Win365, has been designed for simplicity in mind. You get to rent or provision a Windows 10 or 11 desktop. It's a persistent. It's assigned to a named user. The advantage of this is it gives you a full predictable pricing. So it's like some sort of renting a PC, let's say, based on the compute you ask for, whether it's going to cost you $30 or $50 a month kind of thing. So there are no hidden costs and everything. Whereas the Azure Virtual Desktop is designed for flexibility in mind. You could actually use the Windows Server also if necessary. You'll be able to use multi-session desktops similar to our RDA services, or you could also expose remote applications if you do not want a full desktop for some of your workers or contractors. You just want to open up a application. I'm just saying, for example, a browser or a custom application instead of full desktop. So all those things are available in Azure Virtual Desktop. Or if you have to run any specialized workloads like graphical applications, or if you need to run in Azure Government Cloud. So that's where you'll find a lot of flexibility. The thing is, there is no replacement of the solution. Both cater to different needs, but both are from Microsoft. The other gives you consumption-based pricing, pay as you go, or fixed pricing as well. And then if you are coming up with some VDI background, whether it's running Citrix or VMware Horizon, then you will be able to leverage those VDI offerings in Azure as well. But the overarching message is Microsoft has a solution for our customers, whether they want to use a SaaS offering, that is Win365, or a PaaS offering, that is Azure Virtual Desktop, which is our native offering. Alternatively, customers are welcome to reuse their existing investments, which is either on Citrix on Azure or VMware on Azure. Either way, we have a solution. So I just wanted to kind of set the tone before I dive into the Azure Virtual Desktop updates. Moving on. So we rolled out a lot of updates since my last presentation. So we may or may not be able to touch all of them today, but this slide deck will be posted, and it's also available in our public documentation. So we highly encourage you to check it out. But I'll touch upon a few of these. So the first thing we did was we recently rolled out a document called How Azure Virtual Desktop Helps the Enterprises, right? So a lot of times customers have questions. Is it safe to consume these the BDI offerings securely from public cloud? What does it mean? What are my potential use cases? How does it going to look like? So we thought, okay, let's keep it on some sort of a landing page for customers to go out and check it out. So if you click on this page, for example, so it's going to show you like this. What are some of these? What is this Azure Virtual Desktop is? What are some of the use cases you and these? We put together nice architecture and hub and spoke model. How you can securely connect from your on-premises data center. What's the workflow is going to look like, and what do we manage? For example, you can use Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows Server, and also Windows 7 is kind of end of life. But if you have a need to run Windows 7, you can actually run this in Azure Virtual Desktop with the free enterprise support updates, right? What kind of desktop types we offer, whether it's a personal or pooled. Because anytime it comes to a service, there's a lot of components that are related, right? So how do these things work out? So we put together a nice architecture diagram here. So we highly encourage you to take it out. And you also need to keep in mind what kind of limitations we have. Some of them are soft limits, some of them are hard limits. So as you scale or as you think about your enterprise deployment, this page will really come in handy. And most of the times, customer wants to know, what does it cost to me? How much I'm going to pay? So some of the Microsoft customers, the license, they already possess some licenses. They'll be able to use Azure Hybrid Benefit or reserved instances. All those things are available on this page. So we highly encourage customers to kind of check out. So all these things are available on this page. So when it comes to the shared responsibility, we manage the control plane, and the customers are responsible whatever they provision in their Azure subscriptions, right? Like virtual machines, the security, and all those things, right? So this page, whatever I just showed you, fully talks about the shared responsibility, the control panel, control plane, the architecture, and all those things. Okay. So the next one. So
Kumar,
so Azure Virtual Desktop offers.
Sorry, there's a question. If you don't, I mean, do you want to take question to the end or do you want to take them now?
Yeah, I can take now. Yeah, happy to.
Yeah. So the question is, does Citrix compete with W365 and Azure Virtual Desktop, or is it a partnership?
Yeah, that's really a great
Citrix
question.
versus this, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So Microsoft is big on partnerships. So we will never compete with our partners. So we have a native solution like Azure Virtual Desktop, but we are not competing with Citrix or VMware. I mean, there is no feature parity. For example, Citrix or VMware may have, I'm just saying, 100 features. We may only have like 20, 30 features, right? So there is no feature parity, and we are not trying to come closer to that. We may eventually, but the goal is to give us some options to the customers. For example, if you have a greenfield deployment, and if you are new to the BDI services, then you are better off consuming Azure Virtual Desktop. But if your organization has been using Citrix for a long time, and you are comfortable with the ecosystem that Citrix offers, then we encourage our customers to reuse their investment highly. And there is a strong partnership announced between Microsoft and Azure. We have an executive announcement announced between Citrix leadership and Microsoft. So a long story short, there's a huge partnership. If the customers have a Citrix or VMware investment, we encourage them to utilize that, because both Citrix and VMware has a licensing model too, where they could reuse their cloud licenses similar to Azure Hybrid Benefit. So yeah, we would like to use them. Now, when it comes to the Windows 365, again, there is no competition or complementary offerings, right? Win 365 was designed keeping the cloud in mind. It's some sort of SaaS offering. You don't know anything about BDI. You don't have any knowledge. You just wanted to quickly provision a few desktops to onboard your new hires, or you want to temporarily provision it, and then maybe you can trash it out later on or reuse it, right? So you don't have to worry about standing up for infrastructure, security, or identities. You can fully use the cloud-only identities for Win 365. Alternatively, you can bring in your Active Directory if that's what you want. But one is a SaaS model, and the other is a platform as a service, which is the control. And the infrastructure service is what you will provision your the VDIs in your subscription. Does that answer your question? And I'm happy to touch upon it. But yeah, you will find both in Citrix collateral, VMware collateral, you'll find these announcements in their websites too, and so on our Microsoft documentation as well. Moving on. So Azure Virtual Desktop right now offers two types of desktops. One is a personal or persistent, which is assigned to the named users, as you see on my screen. And we also have something like multi-session desktops, where it could be assigned to a group of users, and they'll be sharing the same virtual machine, right? So similar to our RDS services, right? But they both cater to different needs. For example, if you are a developer or requires a dedicated compute and storage, we recommend you to go with personal desktops. But until now, it has been difficult for us to kind of reassign these desktops. For example, the employee is no more with the organization, right? So you wanted to reuse that instead of provisioning a new desktop for him, right? So we didn't have this feature based on the customer's feedback we recently rolled out, in which all you have to do is come to the Azure portal. For example, you see this desktop is assigned to a user, and he's no more with the organization. So all you have to do is just come here. You can unassign so that if you have a new user part of a group, this desktop will be assigned. Alternatively, you can just assign it to a different user right at the moment. So either you can unassign right away. That way, if you have new users, we take care of auto assigning it to him. Or if you have a named user right now that you wanted to assign, you can do so. So this has been a long-term ask that we are happy to have this feature in place, so that because the provisioning requires a lot of things to be taken care, like customers have to get approvals, they have to stand up their computer object in their Active Directory. So it's not as easy as what I described here. So several customers prefer this feature. So now you will be able to reassign these personal desktops to different users. Moving on. Yeah, so like any other, sorry, was there a question? No. Yeah, so these are some of the new client URLs. So the Azure Virtual Desktop can be accessed through web interface. You could also access through Android, Macos, or Windows desktop clients. Although we recommend you to use the native clients for optimal experience when you are dealing with device redirections or audio video calling and everything. Those native desktop clients fare very well. But we recently introduced some URL changes, so we have encouraged customers to, I mean, the old URLs will still work for some time, but especially you need to whitelist these URLs if you are blocking some of these in your firewalls or anything. If you are not, you should still be okay. But this is something that we kind of notify our customers, but just to keep in mind that we have a new URL to access the remote desktop client. Yeah, so this is a new exciting features that I want to talk about. So to access the Azure Virtual Desktop, the initial connectivity always happens on a public endpoint. And the public endpoint is the one that I showed you here, right? These rdweb.wvd. Whatever it is. That's a public endpoint. It's HTTPS 443 TLS 1.2 enabled. It's all good, right? But then what happens is once you are successfully authenticated to the Microsoft Active Directory, you'll be presented to your desktops. You'll be presented to desktops like this. Let me just share my screen. So once you are logged in, you will be accessing your desktops like this, right? And once you are into the desktop, the connectivity is established between the client desktop, which is your bring your own device, to the session desktop on TCP. And we all know TCP requires a handshake. It cannot accept the jitter. The handshake has to be taken place. If there is a drop in the packets, it needs to be resent, right? So customers have asked some efficiency and everything. So we recently released, so last year what we did was we released RDP Shortpath for managed networks. So, and the prerequisite was the customer has to be coming from site-to-site VPN or Express Route, which is another investment from the customer side, right? I mean, customers may say, hey, you are giving me a solution, but with the additional cost of Express Route. That takes time to provision, but also costs a lot of money. So we recently released RDP Shortpath for unmanaged networks, or we call public networks, right? So what it happens is all you have to do is you just have to make a registry entry in your session desktops and you are good to go. And of course, for large scale deployments, you can configure this setting via GPOs too. So you don't need to really manually make this entry. But the technology behind this RDP Shortpath is it's actually based on URCP, Universal Rate Control Protocol. It's not transitioned on TCP, because TCP introduces a lot of it requires some reliable network, right? And especially if you are working in a internet world, your users might be coming from low latency networks, right? They might be connecting from different parts of the country or cities, right? So they may not have a high-speed internet connection. So to handle all those things, so we have introduced this RDP Shortpath for public networks. This is supposed to improve your reliability of the connection, especially if you are coming on low bandwidth networks, right? But of course, if you are already on a high-speed connection, it's even give you much more latency, good latency rather, right? So just to give an example, if you see this, if you connect your desktop and then when you enable that registry entry, this is what you will see. The UDP is enabled, and you can imagine the round trip time is actually in milliseconds, much better than if you run on TCP. The default is TCP, but you need to manually configure this option if you want to take advantage of it, right? So this is one of the enhancements that customers have long been asking for, and based on the customer's feedback, our product team has introduced some of these features that really makes your connection. We can tolerate some low latency, high latency connections and everything. That gives you much reliable connection. Otherwise, we have seen some customers asking for, hey, I'm getting frequent RDP connection, timeouts and everything. Especially if customers are connecting from different parts of the world, but your host pool is provisioned in one of the US regions, right? Of course, our recommendation is still to provision your VDIs closer to the end user location. For example, if your host pool is in one of the US regions like East US or West US, but if your end users are coming from, let's say, Costa Rica or India, that still adds latency. So Microsoft is not challenging the light of physics, but we still recommend you to provision those closer to the end user's location. But some of these enhancements will really make your connection reliable and highly efficient. Okay, this is in a public preview. We announced it recently, and we encourage customers to check it out. And there's an excellent documentation that we made it available please consider checking this out. We ask encourage to try it out. Moving on, this is another enhancement that we recently introduced. So typically what happens is, in order for AVD is a service, right? Behind Azure Virtual Desktop, you still have to deal with VMs, which is compute. It requires some storage, which is like a disk, and then it's networking. So AVD means compute, storage, and networking, right? So in order for AVD to function properly, we need to install some agents, right? That includes new updates, that includes some enhancements, or and all those things. So in the past, what we did was, since we have connectivity to Microsoft endpoints, we auto-install those updates, and some customers didn't like it, right? Although it's not supposed to interrupt your working sessions, but some customers wanted more control. So what we recently announced was, you can, as an enterprise admin, you can actually decide. This is similar to like Windows updates, right? You want control, right? So of course, which is a valid ask. So we recently announced, hey, what's your maintenance window? You let us know. Based on that, we can install those updates, right? So this will ensure that we are not interrupting with production traffic, and we'll continue to update the latest and greatest updates in the Azure portal. It's very simple to configure. So this is my Azure portal. For example, if you see here, this is my host pool, and one of those host pools, here you'll find this schedule agent updates. All you have to do is come here, select agent updates, specify the time zone, whatever it is, and then you select your maintenance window. Can give multiple options, and we will respect that, and we'll only install the agents based on the time you choose. Okay. For now, it has to be enabled at each host pool level. If your organization has a bunch of host pools, then you may ask, hey, I wanted to just roll it out for all the host pools. So I don't have an answer, but that is something that I have seen some customers asking for it. But today, we have to enable this option at the host pool level. Okay. Okay. Moving on. So we talked about RDP Shortpath. We talked about scheduling updates. Oh yeah, so this is great. So right now I'm doing my presentation from a Mac laptop, right? So last year we have announced Windows optimizations, Teams optimization for Windows desktop client, right? And a lot of customers have asked, hey, we connect to these cloud PCs or AVD desktops from my MacBook Air or MacBook desktop and everything, right? Which is what I'm doing. So since then, we have introduced Teams optimizations, which is ideal for audio calling, audio and video calling, right? And those are directly streamed to your local laptop or local device. And it requires to have a certain desktop version installed, which most of us have it if you are working on Macos. The same concept applies for Windows also. For Windows desktop client, it's even a certain version, but we have recently introduced this to the Macos as well. So the way it's going to look like is, if I, for example, log into one of these AVD desktops. So I'm connecting to my AVD desktop. So and then you launch the Teams. And then if you click on this, you don't have to do anything else. You just have to install Windows 10 multi-session image. And if you see this, is it version? I think there's something like about, yeah. Yeah, you see this AVD media optimized. So that is what you are supposed to see. So all you have to do is make sure you have the latest Microsoft desktop client for macOS. And if you use one of those Windows 10 multi-session desktops, so this is what you will see, AVD media optimized, nothing else. Okay, so that is what we recently introduced, I think a few weeks ago. But you can also check when you launch your desktop client, you check your preferences. In the preferences, you have to have this option enabled. enable optimizations for Microsoft Teams. It's in preview, not GA yet, but this is what you need to have this option enabled. And then with Microsoft Teams, you should have this media optimization. This is supposed to give you a good video audio calling experience directly streamed to your local laptop. And in fact, Teams, or for that matter, any video audio calling application, VDI is still from the native desktops, right? So Microsoft has been working hard to enhance this, implement some of these optimizations so that you feel like you're actually working on a local laptop, but still you are working on a remote desktop, right? So this is one thing that we recently introduced. Yeah, so the other thing that we announced was the trusted launch. Hopefully some of you might have heard Microsoft has a Gen 1 and Gen 2 VMs. Gen 2 VMs are supposed to give you a lot of security features. We encourage you to check it out, but I'm just opening this up here. Trusted launch is available for Linux and Windows. It's available in most of the VM SKUs for Linux and Windows. But it talks about secure boot. That way there are no malware attacks directly introduced on your OS kernel and everything, which I will not be going through here, but please check it out. So moving forward, we are encouraging customers to, if at all possible, try Gen 2. In fact, Windows 11 does require Gen 2 VM SKU as well, right? So when you are provisioning Azure Virtual Desktop, you have an option to select standard, which is the default option, but you can also select this trusted launch virtual machines, which gives you some of these security features. So this is something that wasn't possible. So you had to manually provision the VM, install all the agents, but we made it much more convenience for the customers. So they can just come here, select these trusted launch VMs, and they are good to go.
Hey,
please,
Kumar, we have
yes.
1 more minute. Sorry, just time check.
Yeah. Sorry, I think I'm done. So pretty much, so auto scaling, I think I talked about it. So it allows you to auto scale your virtual machines if you are using multi-session desktops, but I can cover this in a future session, but it's public documentation. Please check it out. I think that's pretty much it from my side. I'm on time. Any questions? Happy to take it.
I don't see any questions in the chat window. I think one question you already answered. There was another question that if Citrix is built on AVD or virtual desktop platform, my answer was that I think it's their own implementation. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Citrix doesn't need Azure Virtual Desktop, and we don't need Citrix. When I say we, Azure Virtual Desktop. So Azure Virtual Desktop has their own control plane. Citrix has their own control plane. The beauty of using Citrix is you're already using Citrix for a long time. Your organization is comfortable with this ecosystem, the terminology, machine catalogs, whatnot. So you can just use it. So all we say is with the appropriate AVD licensing, you can use the multi-session desktops directly from the Citrix control plane. That's all it is. But yeah, Citrix doesn't need AVD, vice versa. We are giving you that option flexibility to our customers where they could run Citrix Cloud on Azure. Azure is a public cloud platform, or VMware Horizon, or you can use AVD, but that's a native AVD offering where I mentioned we are not competing. We strongly encourage customers to bring in their existing Citrix investment on Azure because Microsoft is bigger on the partnerships. We encourage them to use a Citrix if necessary. But if a customer has a need to use AVD, we respect that. We are happy to talk to the customers and see what's the right options for them. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Final call. We're a little bit above time.
Any network optimization is needed for remote locations, specifically customer has contractors in international locations and they are trying to put AVD. They have seen a lot of latency there. So any recommendations or suggestions? They were a Citrix workshop before. Now they are moving to AVD. So is any optimization required?
Kumar, are you speaking on mute?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was. So there is something like an AVD experience estimator. So we ask customers to work with Microsoft and make sure that they are working with the cloud architects to deploy the right methodology, right? So we encourage customers to provision the VDIs closer to the end user location. So for example, if the end users are based in, I'm just saying an example in India,
Yeah.
so they need to find any region closer to, for example, we have few regions in India like Central India, South India, and West India, right? So they need to provision those, right? Which will give them optimized experience and a low latency, because we do not want to have any jitter or all those things, right? So as you see, we put together this document. Again, this is just an estimate, but it needs to be fully tested out. For example, I'm in the West Coast. If I'm going all the way to one of the other regions, it's giving me higher latency. Now, for some customers, it's acceptable. For some, it's not, especially if you're running graphical workloads and everything, right? So here's something that they need to closely work with Microsoft to make sure they deploy their VDIs in the right region.
Okay.
But when it comes to the optimizations, initially you'll connect on a public endpoint, and then you can leverage this RDP Shortpath for managed network, which requires a site-to-site VPN, or public networks, which use on a UDP. So that is supposed to at least address 50% of the problem in terms of giving a reliable connection. But again, we need to fully test it out to make sure it really is meeting your needs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions, folks? Okay, thank you, Kumar. Thank you for presenting, man.
Thank you all.
Very good information. And thank you everyone for
Have a nice
joining.
weekend. Okay, thank you. Bye now.
Thank you.